Welcome to Garden Wise Adventures. My name is Malie, and today it's a cold, windy day near the end of October, and it's finally starting to feel like we're going to move out of fall and into winter. Now, the temperatures at night are in the 20s, sometimes in the low 20s, so I have my figs all covered up. And today I wanted to go over how I covered my figs, and I'm going to do it in a step-by-step process. Now, it took me about a day and a half, so this was filmed over the course of several different days. So let's show you how I did my figs. Now, the first thing that I did was I pruned my trees in August. Now, I did this so that they would be able to fit into their protective cages, and pruning in August is going to reduce their vigor a little bit. Now, the next thing that I did was I gathered all of my materials. All of these materials are reusable year after year, and I've just been collecting them as my trees have grown year after year. Next, I tied my tree back. I like to use burlap. Burlap is reusable year after year. And I tie it back so that it could fit more tightly into the cage. I have 2 cages that I'm going to build, and I want the fig tree to be able to be in the center of the cage and not touching the greenhouse plastic as much as possible. So I just wind this around and tie it up so that it is small enough to fit into the cage. The next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to use my tomato stakes. I stake my tomatoes with these. It's a rebar and PVC pipe. I pound those around. I'm going to make an interior cage to keep the fig tree away from everything else. So this is kind of like the interior protective cover for the fig tree. So I pound in my rebar, and then I will put PVC pipe over the top of that. Now, reusing the tomato stakes works really well, because by the time it's time to protect my fig trees, my tomatoes are done for the year and I can take the stakes out. Now, the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to use some insulation. I found this works the best. There's 2-foot tall rolls and 4-foot tall rolls. I use the 2-foot tall ones for my smaller plants and then the 4-foot ones for the taller ones. They're pretty expensive, but they can be reused year after year, and I have been collecting them throughout the years as my fig trees get taller, so it hasn't been too huge of an expense all at once. So I'm going to build that interior cage. This is what insulates the fig tree from the inside, and then I tie it both at the bottom and at the top. Now, the ties that I use is just whatever I have on hand. I use string. This year I had a lot of green stretchy tape, which I can also reuse when it comes time to do my tomatoes. And I try to make it as secure as possible, so I tie both the bottom and the top. So that finished the interior cage. Now I'm going to build an exterior cage. So I use the same thing. I do my rebar and I do my PVC pipe. And this cage is going to serve 2 things. Number one, it's going to build a cage on the outside for the to hold the greenhouse plastic. It's also going to be a cage to put straw inside. Now, I try to make this as narrow as possible so that I don't have to use as much straw. The first year I did it, I had a really thick layer and I used almost a full bale on each tree, and that was a little expensive. So this year I'm trying to make it a little bit more narrow. And I also try to keep the tree on the interior side, so I did tie up the top. And now I am putting up my chicken wire. Now, I reuse this chicken wire every year. There's just the same as with the insulation. There's 2-foot tall rolls and 4-foot tall rolls, and I've just been getting the ones that fit my trees each year, so I don't have to do a huge expenditure every year. So this is going to hold the straw inside, and it's going to form a nice barrier so that the greenhouse plastic fits tightly over the entire project. Now, we did have to switch trees. The day has progressed. So this is how I put the straw in. Straw bales when you pull them apart, they come apart in flakes. So I try to do a half a flake on each side, and it takes 4 of those flakes to line the bottom of each tree. And I try to make sure my coverings are that size. So I do 1 on each side. Now I did run out of straw while doing this, and so I did end up coming back and adding more straw after I filmed this. But this is what it looks like when you put the straw inside of the second cage. Now I use greenhouse plastic. I use greenhouse plastic on my hoop houses and on my fig trees. And every year as I recycle my plastic through my hoop houses, I end up using them for my fig trees also. So this is just the old plastic from my hoop house. So it's extra long. So now I like to have a top on all of my fig trees, and I like to have the greenhouse plastic go all the way around the outside. And then when it's really cold, I cover the top in the winter. But in the fall and in the spring, when the days are warmer, I like to leave it open. So I'm going to show you how this one is open. This one is really long, so I didn't have to have an extra piece of greenhouse plastic. What I did is I just folded it over the top and tied it down. So when it is spring and fall and the weather is not freezing, I leave it open so that the fig trees can breathe and that they can try and go dormant, and so that they can come out of dormancy in the spring. This is what my south side fig trees look like. I have to have extra pieces of plastic that I tie down over the top of these because the plastic was not long enough. But I just slide the top over it when it's time in the fall, when the nighttime temperatures are below 20 degrees. And when they're above freezing in the spring, I take the tops off and I leave these on until probably June. So that's how I covered my figs. Now, one thing that I found that in Utah that is an issue is if you notice that when I covered my fig trees, they were not dormant, and they still are not dormant. If fig trees in my area, or at least at my house that I've noticed, if they hit the 20-degree temperatures, in the low 20s, then we start seeing dieback in the branches, especially if they haven't gone dormant. So I do have to cover my figs before they go dormant. And the problem is it does delay dormancy for a little while. So my figs end up going dormant probably around, I'd say the mid-November, near the end of November. And then they do come out of dormancy pretty early, depending on how warm this spring is, because they do stay warmer inside their covering. So let's take you around and show you all my figs now that they are completely covered. Now this one is pretty cold. I'm really hoping that I don't shake too much. But each fig is covered a little bit differently, just depending on how much plastic I had. Some of them I just tie it around like that. This plastic was long enough I didn't need an extra cover. This one I just tie it at the top. We have a cover for this one. Sometimes I'll put ties over the top so the wind does not just blow them off because they're not long enough on the side. And then some of them are just long enough that they can cover the whole thing and I can tie it down. Now, as I said before, when the temperatures get a little bit warmer, if the temperatures are not going to go below freezing at night, then I will remove the tops. Now, if you look in here, as I said, we've been in the 20s. You can see that the exposed fig has actually had some dieback. Now the twigs, I'm not sure if the twigs that are exposed like this are going to live, but the important part is deep inside, the parts that have been insulated will live. I'm not as worried about the tips as I am about the base. Now my pomegranate trees, we're trying something new this year. In the past, I've wrapped them with bubble wrap and greenhouse plastic, and I insulated them that way. But these are supposedly a little more hardy pomegranates. So what we're going to try this year is we just tied everything up inside like I tied my figs and then bundled them up with a little bit of burlap. So I'm hoping this will be enough that we don't get too much dieback on my figs. This is a Kazake hardy pomegranate. And this one is a Parfianka. Now the Parfianka pomegranates are definitely more tender than the Kazake or the Slovatsky. I have a Slovatsky out front that I'll show you. So I did wrap this in bubble wrap and wrapped it in greenhouse plastic. Now this is how I protected it last year, and we only had a slight amount of dieback last year. and it came back beautifully. So that's the way we're going to do it this year. And here's my Slovatsky pomegranate. It's got a little bit more showing, but as you can see, even though we've hit the 20s and we've had dieback in the figs underneath their greenhouse plastic, we have not had any dieback on these branches yet. Now I'm pretty sure that the top part of this will see some dieback, but I'm hoping the bottom part is insulated enough that we don't get any dieback. Got one more fig here. Let's show you the ones on the other side. And these are the figs on my south side. Now these do get a little bit more warmth, and as a result, these are the ones that usually come out of dormancy the quickest. And it's going to be very interesting for me to see how well my Black Mission fig does. Supposedly, they're not as hardy as the other figs. So that's how I protect my figs. Now I think I'm going to head back inside. It is absolutely freezing out here. As I said, it's in the low 40s today, and I'm not quite used to it being that cold. So we're going to head back inside and not do all the other projects I was thinking about doing. We're going to get another warm streak next week, and that's when I'll finish the rest of my garden projects. So I would love to hear what you're doing in your gardens, and if you grow figs in cold climates, and I would love to hear how you protect them. So hopefully this video has been helpful to you. If it has been helpful, I hope you like, subscribe, share it with your friends, and go have a wonderful garden adventure.